Our devotional thought from the Old Testament today comes from Leviticus chapter 5. Leviticus chapter 5, verses 5 through about verse 11. And the thought is this: everybody can afford to bring an offering to God. Everybody can afford to bring an offering to God. Now, sometimes I remember as a baby Christian, I read through these offerings in the Old Testament, and I thought, my goodness, that's a lot of money. I mean, an entire lamb. Some families might not have a lamb. An entire bull, a goat. I mean, this was an agricultural society, and the Bible speaks about people taking one person's lamb away from them. How can people do these sacrifices if they don't have any prosperity? Leviticus 5, beginning with verse 5. When you become aware of your guilt in any of these ways, you must confess your sin. Then you must bring to the Lord as a penalty for your sin a female from the flock, either sheep or goat. This is a sin offering with which the priest will purify you from your sin, making you right with God. But if you can't afford to bring a sheep, you may bring to the Lord 2 turtledoves or 2 young pigeons as a penalty for your sin. One of the birds will be for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. Verse 11. If you cannot afford to bring 2 turtledoves or 2 young pigeons, you may bring 2 quarts of choice flour for your sin offering. Since it is an offering for sin, you must not moisten it with olive oil or put any frankincense on it. Now notice with me, please. Even under the Old Testament law, with sacrifices that had to be made for sin, we don't do this today because Jesus is our sacrifice, all right? You'll see bloody sacrifices again in the millennium as we look back at what Jesus has done for us. Right now, these people were looking forward to Jesus as the sacrifice. But you look at it again and you say these things cost a lot of money, but he said if you don't have enough for the sheep or the goat, then you bring 2 young pigeons. And if you don't have enough for 2 young pigeons, then bring 2 quarts of fine flour. Now, that would be almost nothing because people ground their own flour. So basically, they would just go to their field, pull some wheat, come and put it on the stone and grind it themselves and put some effort in it. Everybody could give something. Many, 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 many years ago, back in 1980, we were all so poor in those days. Our entire offerings in those days for a Sunday, for all of the services on a weekend would be 4,000 pesos. But some of our people were so poor and they said, Pastor Sumrall, we have no money, but we want to give something. And I used to tell them, based on these verses, God was looking for the effort of you wanting to do something. They had to grind flour until it was choice flour. I said, why don't you take a stone and just make it shiny? Just sit there and polish a stone and then bring that stone and bring it to the Lord. And we had several families in the early days that's what they did. They'd find a seashell, they'd find a stone. First, they'd just polish it. Later on, they began to paint things on it. But that's what they could do. Everybody could give an offering to the Lord. Now, beloved, I want you to understand, with God, it's not what you give. And with God, it's not how much you give. With God, it's the generosity that He looks at.